Here is our evaluation question 3. What have you learnt from your audience feedback?
From our original pitch, they said that we should make our plans for the narrative clearer. We knew that we wanted to display a romantic relationship, however, this is pretty much as far as we got in our planning. Our audience suggested that a more comical video to parallel the upbeat nature of the song would be a good idea. So we changed our narrative to a comical sequence of our lead singer asking out a lot of girls. They liked the idea of using the comic book and animation in our video. However, they said we need to make sure that including this did not take away from the actual filming of the video. We simplified our planning by restricting the comic book effects to transitions at the beginning and the end of our narrative clips.
Regarding our animatic, most of the feedback we received was positive. Our audience liked the use of our comic book transitions and other effects, such as comic book borders. They agreed that they were appropriate to task and conveyed the quirky image of our band. Yet our performance was particularly criticised for its lack of variety in shots. Therefore, we tried to include more panning shots from interesting angles. I particularly liked a panning shot of the band playing from the back. Another suggestion was that we needed to make more shots focused on the lead singer. We attempted to adhere to this by making amendments to our planning documents, creating more brief intervals between the narrative to include more shots of Matt singing.
We received a lot of positive feedback for Draft 1. We had members of the class complete a tick sheet on how well they thought our video met the marking criteria, which can be seen on the slide. Our audience liked our costumes, believing that they were young and trendy and appealed to our audience demographic. We were praised for how well we managed to balance our narrative and performance, and many people thought that we'd really managed to create a good flow in our music video. However, for Draft 2, we made sure that all of our performance footage really was on beat and that we cut on the beat to make sure it was a really professional product in the end. Another suggestion was to use the conventional dots of a comic book throughout our video. While this would have been visually interesting, I think this could take away from enhancing our footage and making it seem kind of more blurry and less high quality. I think it's more effective now that we've taken on board some of these ideas, and it looks quite consistent without being too overbearing.
Moving on to Draft 2, the criticisms became more technical. It was pointed out that we should perhaps have more conventional speech bubbles of a comic book, yet I prefer the bubbles that we have already used, as it provides a more modern twist on a classic idea. Our footage is slightly unsteady at the beginning of the video, which our audience said was not reflective of a professional text. However, again, this is easily fixable. We can either colour correct the footage or stabilise it. We either cut the footage or stabilise it. It was noted that we needed to do some colour correction on our performance footage, as bits of it were still quite red in lighting. We took this footage into After Effects to apply the correct filter to colour correct with Luma and curves. The result was that our footage ended up being more blue in colour and looked of a higher quality than it had originally been. Many were confused by who Louis was in relation to the singer, and why we had chosen to dress him up as a cowboy. Our audience had read it as being quite random and unconventional. Therefore, we decided to rearrange some of the footage, putting a close-up of Louis's face next to the clip of him walking in to greet Ellie, to make Louis's relationship to Max more apparent. However, this rearrangement still did not manage to convey how we ironically used the cowboy costume for Louis.
From looking at our digipack, many people managed to identify the demographic as young adults, and also managed to identify the psychographic as indie. The colours we had used were conventional of a feel-good indie album, and the objects we used on the cover were positioned well and aesthetically pleasing. The audience felt that while our front cover was interesting, it was not bold enough, and they recommended that we created a black outline around the words. Also, our audience were quite critical of the fact that we hadn't created a spine, which was conventional of a digipack, something we set out as a target for our next draft. Also, they cited how we had failed to include the relevant copyright information on the back of our digipack, which we then endeavoured to do for our next draft. Finally, they liked the simplicity of our costumes for the performance, as they complemented the colourfulness of the overall album.
Finally, we looked at our advert. This was also well received. Our audience thought it was informative as we included dates of release, where you could buy the album from, and what other people had already thought of it. They thought by including websites and iTunes we had appealed to the online savvy nature of our demographic. However, we received criticisms on the aesthetics of our poster, such as making all the writing on our poster clearer, and we intend to do this by putting an outline around the writing. We also were told to make the record company logos more clear, which can be easily rectified. Another suggestion was that we added drop shadows of some of our objects in order to make them more 3D. However, we decided not to do this as we think it could possibly ruin the aesthetics of the poster.